Hello. Hope we're not disturbing. Suddenly, the living room door opened, and in came my husband's colleague, Miller. Following him, about 4 others entered one after another, with my husband, Kevin, trailing behind them with a crude smile. Sorry, but what's going on here? Today's a barbecue with friends. Hurry up and buy some meat and beer. Kevin, who had established a habit of talking down to me, said this to me. It seems like birds of a feather flock together, as Kevin's friends were also directing crude smiles our way. I was furious. I'm actually about to go on a trip, so that's not possible. What? Kevin's face filled with anger, as if embarrassed in front of his friends. Normally, I would panic and comply upon seeing that look on his face, but now, completely out of patience, I couldn't care less about Kevin's mood. Just make sure you're careful with fire, okay? Hey! I ignored them all and left the house. However, a few hours later, I received a call while on my trip that my husband had been taken into police custody. What on earth did he do? My name is Isabella. I'm a 48-year-old civil servant. My parents died in a car accident when I was in college. I live in the house they left me, and I graduated college with the help of insurance money and scholarships. I was lucky enough to become a civil servant, and though living alone was lonely, it was stable. The administration I worked for was far from the house I lived in, so I rented out the house I lived in with my parents and rented a studio near my workplace for myself. I rented out the house as is, but it quickly found a tenant because of its good location. The person who rented the house was very kind, and knowing my circumstances, told me I could come over any time. Thanks to the rental income and my civil servant salary, I was living a more stable life than others my age. Around that time, visiting tourist spots became my hobby. There's a unique atmosphere everywhere, somehow reassuring yet making me tense, and I loved it. I met my husband, Kevin, at a book club for working adults that a friend invited me to. I was instantly drawn to the quiet and kind Kevin. Perhaps sensing that, Kevin actively pursued me, leading the way in our relationship, which was difficult for me to navigate. After dating for 2 years, he proposed on my 29th birthday, and we got married. The following year, our daughter, Evelyn, was born, and we were very happy. However, that's when Kevin's true nature began to show. Since I was working, we had agreed to share household chores. Kevin had kept to this agreement until I went on maternity leave, but as soon as I started my leave, he began going out to drink more often and completely stopped doing any household chores as soon as I took parental leave. Hey, the dishes are your job, right? Please. What? You've been lazing around all day at home and you're giving orders? You should do it, Kevin said, and quickly prepared to go out. After Evelyn was born, he would go out to drink about 4 times a week on his own, not caring at all for Evelyn. Juggling childcare and household chores while suffering from sleep deprivation due to night feedings was extremely hard. But complaining to Kevin didn't help. He didn't understand at all and would insult me by saying I was inefficient. Continuing this life made my love for Kevin fade, and by the time Evelyn was 5, I saw him merely as a roommate. Fortunately, I didn't have to work overtime or on weekends and holidays. This allowed me to spend a lot of time with Evelyn. Although Evelyn was a handful with her night crying and frequent feedings as a baby, by the age of 6, she had become a very mature child. She was clingy when it was just the 2 of us, but she also took the initiative to help around the house and always said thank you for each little thing. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that watching Evelyn grow was my only joy, and I adored her. However, Kevin was not involved with Evelyn, only occasionally approaching her when he was in a good mood. By then, his true colors were fully shown, not doing household chores, not participating in child-rearing, and going out to drink almost daily, coming home smelling of women's perfume. But I had grown so indifferent to Kevin that I didn't care anymore. Even so, the reason I didn't choose divorce was to not make life difficult for Evelyn. Honestly, with the rental income from my parents' house and my salary, I could easily afford to send her to college. But I didn't want to burden Evelyn if I became unable to work. Fortunately, Kevin seemed to be competent at his job, and even though it was a small to mid-size company, he earned more than I did. Thus, I had come to view him as the person who would earn the money for Evelyn's education and our living expenses. However, around the time Evelyn entered high school, Kevin's spending got worse. I had always let him spend freely on anything other than Evelyn's tuition and living expenses, but then the school contacted me saying the tuition payment had not gone through. I hurriedly transferred the money from my own account to avoid trouble, but this made me realize there was no benefit to staying married and not divorcing. Thinking this, I approached Kevin, who was about to go out and was looking at himself in the mirror in the bathroom. "Hey, the school called saying Evelyn's tuition payment didn't go through." "Huh, so? So? What do you mean so? You were supposed to pay for it. That kid has been kind of rude lately. Always glaring at me." "That's because she's going through adolescence, isn't it?" I felt a headache coming on. Kevin himself must have gone through a rebellious phase. Yet he refuses to take an interest in his own daughter's growth and uses her being rebellious as an excuse not to pay for her tuition, which is just the lowest, not just as a dad but as a person. At this moment, I decided to divorce Kevin once Evelyn started college. And until then, I resolved to act like a compliant wife. As I was thinking this, Kevin looked at me with a smug smile. "What? You know, I hardly ever come home, and do I really need to contribute to the living expenses? So, how about this? I'll pay for that kid's school fees instead of giving you living expenses." Fine. My recently made resolution was already being tested, but I managed to hold firm. Not contributing to the living expenses was unthinkable. But not having Evelyn's tuition paid would be a bigger problem, so I reluctantly agreed. And the money that used to go to living expenses now became Kevin's pocket money, making his lifestyle even more extravagant. One day, as I was walking through the entertainment district on my way home from work, I spotted Kevin with his arm wrapped around the shoulder of a man I recognized. Kevin hadn't noticed me, but the man next to him did and came over. "If it isn't Isabella. What are you doing here?" Well, I think I met him at our wedding, but he wasn't introduced, so I didn't know his name. And despite the distance, he already smelled strongly of alcohol. How long had they been drinking? I managed to suppress my urge to grimace and put on a smile. "Oh, I'm Miller. Kevin and I were in the same club at college. By the way, Isabella, you're really beautiful. How about one night with me?" "Just kidding." Hey. If you want a middle-aged woman like this, I'll give her to you." More than Miller's frivolous words, I was shocked by Kevin's words. Even if he was drunk, those were not words to be uttered in front of his wife. "Really? Maybe I'll book a hotel next time then." "I'll pass. I'm in a hurry, so I'll be going." A chill ran down my spine, and I quickly left the scene. I could hear Miller and Kevin saying something behind me, but I ignored it all. That night, Kevin, who seemed to have come home in the middle of the night, didn't even remember seeing me the next morning. When I asked about Miller, Kevin bragged about how he had started some profitable business recently and that he had gone to hear about it yesterday. "Don't come begging for money when I become rich, okay?" I responded lightly to his buoyant words. As long as Evelyn's tuition was paid, I had no expectations from Kevin anymore. However, a decisive incident would occur a little after Evelyn started college. It happened on the day I was planning to take a solo trip, intending to use up my accumulated paid leave. After gathering everything at the entrance, I took a break. Kevin had left in a happy mood that morning, so I had sent him a message just in case. He had read it, so I felt I had done my duty, and I sipped my tea. Then there was a sound from the entrance, and I thought Kevin had come back unusually early, but the person who came through the door made me almost spit out my tea.
Hello.
Hope we're not disturbing. Suddenly, Miller walked in through the living room door, followed by about 4 others.
Sorry, what's going on here?
I'm having a barbecue with some friends. Hurry up and buy some meat and beer. Just like Kevin, who was laughing, his friends were also giving me crude smiles. I was furious. I'm about to go on a trip, so that's not possible.
What?
Kevin's face filled with anger as if he was embarrassed in front of his friends. Normally, I would have panicked and complied upon seeing his face, but now, completely fed up, I had no interest in Kevin's mood. Just be careful with fire, okay?
Hey!
I ignored them all and left the house. However, a few hours later, I received a call while on my trip that my husband had been taken into police custody. What on earth did he do? The call from the police was for identification, and they said I didn't need to come to the station right away. Apparently, they asked Kevin if he could prepare clothes for staying in the detention center because the interrogation might take a while, and he gave them my name and contact details.
We could lend some and bill you later.
Oh, that's fine. Please make him pay for it. Understood. We'll contact you if there's anything else. Yes, please do. It seems the reason for being taken into police custody was attempting to forcibly bring a woman who was walking outside while drunk into his home. It was a red-handed arrest, and there was no room for excuses, and he would likely be charged. Miller was facing other charges, and there was a possibility that Kevin was involved as well. Hearing that, I sat down on the spot. It was good that I had arrived at my destination. I cried. Then, coffee was placed on the table in front of me.
Mom, are you okay? What happened?
Actually, the place I was traveling to was the area where Evelyn's university is located, and I was going to stay at Evelyn's place during my trip. The call from the police came just as I was about to take a break after arriving at Evelyn's place.
Dad's been arrested by the police.
The reason is a bit. It's okay. Tell me when you've calmed down. Hey, Mom, maybe you should seriously consider divorce. You've been enduring for my sake, right? I ranked first in my class this time. I got a scholarship with no repayment obligation, my professor told me. So, I'll be fine.
Evelyn.
You're right. Evelyn's words made up my mind. As a parent, I felt unreliable for making my daughter say this, but at the same time, I was very happy that Evelyn had grown up to be so kind and splendid. A few days later, I received a call from the police that only Kevin had been released. It seemed Kevin claimed to be a victim, unaware that Miller's business involved criminal activity. In fact, it was proven that Kevin knew nothing, and he was declared innocent, which disappointed me internally. The day after the police contacted me, Kevin called me. I didn't want to answer the phone, but thinking about what comes next, I decided to answer. Hello?
Ah, you picked up.
Where the hell are you? At Evelyn's place. When I said that, Kevin seemed to think for a moment. But eventually, he didn't come up with an answer and quickly raised his voice. I don't know where that kid lives. Just come back home. The housework is piling up. Sorry, but I'm not coming back.
What?
My firm refusal seemed to surprise Kevin, and he was momentarily speechless. I repeated slowly to the silence on the other end of the phone. I'm not coming back. Please, let's get a divorce.
Do you even know what you're saying?
Kevin managed to squeeze out some words. I didn't respond to him. Then, simultaneously, I heard the sound of a mobile phone being dropped on the other end. He must have been quite shocked. I delivered the final blow.
Let's discuss the rest through a lawyer. I'll have my lawyer contact you later. Wait, hey! Isabella!
Kevin was calling my name, but I hung up without a care. Then, I contacted the lawyer I had just hired yesterday. It seemed the lawyer had reached out to Kevin immediately, as I received multiple calls from Kevin, all of which I ignored. I then contacted my workplace. I had already been considering early retirement, but I took this as an opportunity to resign and decided to live near Evelyn. Fortunately, I had an inheritance left by my parents and a steady income from renting out my family home. Additionally, I would receive a severance package, so living on my own wouldn't be an issue. Since it would take about 2 months to finalize my resignation, I rented a short-term apartment near my workplace to wrap up my job. I commuted from there and completed the handovers and other work. During this time, Kevin called me multiple times, but I had my lawyer handle all communications. Kevin was adamant about not wanting a divorce, and despite hearing how much he had hurt me,
I didn't do it. It's all a misunderstanding.
He kept insisting. Reluctantly, I agreed to a meeting. It was challenging to even set a date, but 3 weeks after proposing the meeting, we finally scheduled it, and I prepared myself for a major confrontation. On the day of the meeting, the person who showed up at the meeting place was a completely sullen middle-aged man.
I'm not going to divorce. I was just deceived. I'm not at fault. Let's sit down and talk about it.
I responded dispassionately to Kevin's remarks and entered the restaurant ahead of him. The high-end restaurant, designed with separate rooms for each table, was where Kevin and I had celebrated our engagement with a meal.
Do you remember this place? Huh?
Kevin's response extinguished the last bit of sentiment I had left. Even after everything, we were once committed to spending a lifetime together. I had hoped that remembering this place might lead to a more amicable discussion, but my consideration was in vain. Let's start the discussion. At my cue, the lawyer beside me took out several documents. They contained evidence of Kevin's actions and infidelity, as well as details about the dubious business he was involved in with Miller. Kevin looked over them with annoyance, then sighed.
If you have complaints, say them directly. Sneaky woman. These are not complaints, but facts needed for our discussion.
Kevin seemed to become even more irritated upon hearing this. Still, I was unwavering. However, when a new document was presented, Kevin's complexion changed.
Hey, this is...
Oh, didn't you know? The document included a photo of a woman in a wedding dress and her husband, smiling happily. Kevin paled at the sight of the two. The woman you're currently having an affair with, she's your boss's wife, right?
No way!
Kevin, apparently unaware, looked utterly panicked. His earlier defiance had vanished, replaced by sheer panic. Investigations revealed that Kevin had been involved with the affair partner for about 3 years, considering divorcing me and marrying her until their communication recently became sporadic. She had married Kevin's boss before meeting Kevin. Apparently, it was a shotgun wedding. They had just taken their 10th anniversary wedding photos. Of course, the evidence was sent to Kevin's company, and it was scheduled to be delivered to Kevin's boss today. The affair partner would also be receiving a certified mail by now.
Speak of the devil.
At that moment, Kevin's phone, placed on the table, rang, displaying his boss's name. Kevin didn't answer, so I tapped to take the call and put it on speaker. A furious shout, loud enough to break windows, erupted from the phone.
You've been betraying me? Having an affair with my wife during work hours is a betrayal to the company as well. Don't expect to stay comfortably at the company from tomorrow.
I'm sorry. Kevin's apology was pitiful, with none of the charm he once had. I pushed the divorce papers towards him, tapping on the name field twice.
So, will you sign the divorce papers for now? No.
With the prospect of remarrying his affair partner gone, Kevin stubbornly refused to divorce. I called out towards the door, seemingly in a quandary. Says he. This is a problem. What should we do?
Is someone there?
Kevin asked, fearfully looking towards me as I gestured with my eyes towards the door. As he reluctantly looked at the door, which then opened to reveal someone, Kevin's face turned pale, and he began to tremble.
Dad, Mom, why are you here?
Standing there were the in-laws. Kevin wasn't on good terms with the in-laws' house, and after we got married, he forbade me from interacting with the in-laws. So, for Kevin, the last people he expected to see here were present. My mother-in-law briefly greeted me before walking up to Kevin with a raised hand, delivering a sharp slap that left his face red. With a face even redder than Kevin's, my mother-in-law started shouting.
How could you? You have a wonderful wife like Isabella and you cheat? What have you done?
Wait, Mom, you and Isabella haven't seen each other since we got married. How would you know she's wonderful? Before I could answer Kevin's reasonable question, my father-in-law spoke up.
Isabella has been sending us letters every month, showing us how Evelyn is growing up. Recently, she and Evelyn even came to visit us a few times. You, who haven't contacted us even once since getting married, don't deserve such a good person. Hey! Didn't I tell you not to contact them? Why are you going behind my back?
Kevin turned away from my father-in-law and yelled at me. In reality, the in-laws' house is a farmhouse, where Kevin's brother and his wife live together. Kevin, who inexplicably despised this arrangement, would constantly criticize and make snide remarks towards his brother's wife, resulting in him being kicked out after graduating college. When I learned from the in-laws and Kevin's brother's family that Kevin forbade me from talking to them because he feared his misdeeds would be exposed, I felt dizzy from my poor judgment in men. When I sent the greeting letters, they would kindly call me back. That's how we secretly continued our relationship.
You were deceiving me? Who I associate with is none of your business. I don't want to hear it from a man who repeatedly cheats and gets involved in shady dealings.
As I retorted, Kevin was visibly frustrated. Suddenly, he defiantly signed the divorce papers.
Seems like you went through a lot of trouble. Fine, I'll divorce you, but don't expect to get any money or the house from me. What are you talking about? You won't be dividing anything. Everything will go to Isabella.
My mother-in-law interjected, nudging Kevin, who was overwhelmed by her. I watched him coldly before storing the divorce papers in my bag and leaving the restaurant with my lawyer. Afterward, I went to the municipal office to submit the divorce papers. Though it happened quicker than I thought, my heart felt incredibly calm. Kevin was fired from his small company after being accused of having an affair with his boss's wife and engaging in infidelity during work hours. Having handed over the house and money to me, he was left with nothing. Eventually, the in-laws took him back to their house temporarily before sending him off to a distant relative's place. Kevin's brother's wife, not having forgiven his past actions, refused to even let Kevin into the house. Actually, her daughter, who got married last year and is soon due for delivery, was coming home soon. It being summer, Kevin spent a night in a small shed on the property before being taken away early in the morning by the relative. The affair partner and her husband, Kevin's boss, although they didn't divorce, were forced to live with the boss's parents under constant surveillance and endured endless taunts and harassment from her mother-in-law. Kevin once escaped to see the affair partner, but she was just playing with him, and upon seeing him, she demanded,
"Give me some money to escape."
My mother-in-law learned through relatives that Kevin was devastated by this. Kevin returned to the relative's house, shocked. Now, Kevin works non-stop, and even on his rare days off, he can't go out satisfactorily due to the relative's surveillance. I continue to maintain a relationship with the in-laws as Evelyn's grandparents. My brother-in-law's family are great people, and we enjoy meals together during events, and I feel like I have gained a new family. Evelyn was a bit upset about being left out, but was very happy about the divorce. Now living nearby, we go out together twice a week. As for me, having moved to a region with many tourist spots, I'm immersing myself in hobbies at leisure. Owning 2 houses in the city center and renting them out, I can cover my living expenses with the rental income alone. So, the severance pay, remaining insurance money, and the settlement from Kevin's divorce are freely used for Evelyn's college expenses, my hobbies, and travel. I often think I should have divorced sooner, enjoying such a leisurely life.
Well, shall we go?
Holding the plane ticket Evelyn gave me for my birthday, I set off on a trip. Chasing after daily chores and constantly facing verbal abuse, I've become completely exhausted. I'm going back to my parents. I told my husband Abel and our daughter Marcy, but their response was far from sympathetic.
Instead, I got, "Huh? Who's going to make lunch for me and Marcy then?" Right, a housewife shouldn't slack on the household chores. Besides, you don't have a home to return to anymore. There's no one out there who will welcome you back.
When I ignored them and left the house, Abel and Marcy bombarded me with furious calls. "This number is currently in use. Please check the number and call again. Note that the number will be changed immediately, so you will not be able to reach me ever again." After saying that, I turned off my mobile phone. Time to get a new phone contract immediately. By permanently ignoring calls from Abel and the others. My name is Alicia, 41 years old. I live with my husband and daughter, along with my father-in-law and mother-in-law, making us a family of 5. Abel and I met at the company we both worked for after graduating from college. A classic office romance. We got married at 24, and by 26, I had given birth to our daughter Marcy and quit my job to become a full-time homemaker. I've been a housewife ever since. After having Marcy, we moved to a spacious house a bit far from the city. It's a bit old, but Abel said it was big enough so we wouldn't need to move even if we had 3 or 4 children. The commute is inconvenient, so I drive Abel to and from work every day. I wave goodbye at the station and pick him up in the evening based on his heading home text. Honestly, it was sometimes a hassle, but even that felt like a happy daily event. The early days of our marriage were truly blissful. Living the sweet life, I wondered if anyone could be happier than I was in those newlywed days. Abel was the young hope of the sales department, well-paid, handsome, and liked by everyone. Initially, I was drawn to his looks and gentlemanly behavior, admiring him. Marrying someone like a celebrity, I was the envy of my coworkers. I was indeed proud to have been chosen by Abel. But that life came to an end. When I gave birth to Marcy, at Abel's wish, I quit my job to become a housewife. That's when Abel's attitude began to change. "It must be nice being a housewife, so carefree. What do you do all day at home?" No matter what he said, it was childcare and chores. Caring for a newborn is a 24/7 job without breaks. There's no morning, noon, or night. If the baby cries, I have to wake up, feed, change diapers, soothe, and hardly get any sleep. Please, can you keep the night quiet? You might be able to sleep during the day, but I have to get up in the morning and go to work, you understand? When Marcy cried, I would immediately leave the bedroom for the farthest room. Sometimes, I even went outside and spent the night on a bench in the garden until morning. Despite this, Abel did show affection for Marcy and occasionally offered me comfort, which was enough for me to endure it all. Even with little sleep, Marcy's smile and Abel's thank you made all the fatigue vanish. My body was tired, but I still felt I was living a happy life. My life changed again when Marcy started elementary school. I'm thinking of inviting my parents to live with us. What do you think? Fortunately, we have enough room. Although he phrased it as a question, I knew it was already decided. Since quitting my job after Marcy was born, my opinions hardly mattered anymore. You say that because you don't understand the current society. Whenever I expressed my opinion, Abel would sigh and say, "Well, if you don't understand, just leave it to me. Just make sure Marcy doesn't grow up to be foolish like you." So, to his "What do you think?" I could only reply, "That sounds fine." I had only met my in-laws a few times, during our wedding introduction, the wedding itself, and subsequent Christmases. But they seemed like decent people, and I didn't foresee any issues living together. I wondered if Abel had always intended for us to live with his parents when he bought this house, but I had no choice but to agree. Soon, my in-laws moved in with us. "We're family now, let's get along," said my father-in-law Dewey with a smile, while my mother-in-law Haley said, "Please take care of us," without any expression. At that moment, I was more wary of Haley's cold gaze than Dewey's smile. However, I soon realized that it was Dewey I should have been cautious of. "What, cereal for breakfast? Abel, can a man work all day on that?" Dewey said to Abel the morning after they moved in. "Yes, but Alicia is busy with childcare, so we make do with cereal," Abel replied. I was shocked by Abel's words, because it was Abel who preferred cereal in the mornings. I used to eat bread for breakfast at my parents' house. But Abel said bread made him feel heavy and hindered his work in the morning, so he asked for cereal. Since then, cereal had been our breakfast. "Alicia, is that true?" "No, well." "What is it? Be clear." Until that moment, Dewey had been speaking calmly, but suddenly, he shouted at me loudly and slammed the table with a loud noise. Marcy started crying in shock. "It's okay, Marcy, no need to cry. Mom just did something wrong, so I scolded her," Dewey said, softening his voice. He lifted Marcy, saying, "That's enough for today. From tomorrow morning, just prepare bread and fried eggs, bacon, and maybe 2 more things. I'll manage with that," ensuring Marcy couldn't see my face as he glared at me. From that day on, Dewey started treating me like a servant. Whenever he spoke, it was always with intimidation, and if he was displeased, he would shout. Thankfully, he never resorted to physical violence, probably because he didn't want to leave visible marks. The misfortune that befell me wasn't just from Dewey. Abel began to mimic his father's behavior. While he had always looked down on me and tried to control me, he hadn't outright insulted me with foul language until he started acting like Dewey. "Hey, what's this? The table is dirty. Are you telling me to eat in such a filthy place?" "I'm sorry, I was just feeding Marcy. I'll clean it up right now." "What did you say? Are you blaming your carelessness on our sweet granddaughter?" "No, that's not what I meant." "Apologize. Apologize to Marcy right now." And so, I was forced to deeply apologize to my own daughter. In this manner, being silent and just doing the housework was deemed enough, treating me completely like a servant. Abel and Dewey would shout at me together, making me shrink back, ensuring I couldn't oppose them. And Marcy started to think she could treat me the same way.
What's with today's sandwich? My friend's mom makes really pretty sandwiches. Why can't you make anything but these weird ones?
Elementary school-aged Marcy would sigh and say this, and Dewey and Abel would happily take her side. Now, the only person in this house who isn't against me is Haley, who just silently watches everything. Although I can't say Haley is an ally, the presence of someone who doesn't attack me in the house provides some comfort. This life continued for 10 years, and before I knew it, I had become a soulless servant, completely at the mercy of Dewey, Abel, and Marcy. One day, as usual, Dewey, Abel, and Marcy continued to berate me about how useless I was, only alive thanks to their support. Blaming myself for everything, believing I was incapable of doing anything right. I was preparing breakfast and lunch for the next day for the three of them, and ironing Abel's shirts and Marcy's clothes until late at night when Haley came to me and said, "Alicia, I think that's enough."
What is she talking about?
I didn't stop ironing but glanced at Haley's face for a moment.
You should escape as soon as you can, before you end up like me.
It wasn't until she said that I finally stopped and looked up.
I was just like you, at the mercy of Dewey, his father, and Abel. Just like you now, believing it was all my fault, that I had to try harder to be recognized.
I was surprised. I had never had such a conversation with Haley. In fact, I realized I had never talked to Haley about personal matters beyond necessary household chores and errands. Despite living together for 10 years, Haley began to share bits of her life with me. She too was happy at first, just like me. In Haley's time, it was understood that women quit their jobs upon marriage, an unspoken agreement. And she had embraced her role as a housewife without question. Then, 2 years later, when Abel was born, the attitude of Dewey's father and Dewey himself began to change.
Be grateful you don't have to work. Since you're a housewife, make sure the housework is perfect. Serve Abel like you would a king, you're the lowest in this house.
She was continually told. Like me, Haley was told this repeatedly, made to believe it was right, and lived being constantly berated by her father-in-law, husband, and son.
Ever since you came to this house and I saw you suffering the same fate as me, I thought I was finally being freed.
I'm sorry. Haley apologized to me after saying this. From Haley's story, I learned that Dewey's family believes only their bloodline is noble and important. They think it's okay to oppress and use people like Haley and me, who are not related by blood, and treat us as servants.
But to make sure you can't escape before that happens, they initially welcome you kindly. At the beginning of the marriage, Dewey and his father were so nice to me that I thought I was the happiest person in the world.
It was the same for me. I thought I was the luckiest person in the world to have married Abel.
Once they see you can't escape, they gradually reveal their true selves, and by the time you realize it, it's too late to do anything.
That was true. I first started feeling uneasy after Marcy was born. Abel began to look down on me using Marcy.
Marcy is cute because she looks like me. It's really good she doesn't resemble Mom.
Abel indeed has a handsome face, falling into the category of narcissism. But I smiled it off, thinking every parent finds their child adorable.
Marcy is really smart too. She must have gotten that from me. You shouldn't end up like Mom just because you're a girl.
I was a bit irritated then, but convinced myself it was just his way of being sweet to Marcy. I wanted Marcy to be cute and smart too.
What's this mess? Marcy could get hurt. Clean this up immediately.
As Marcy grew and began scattering her toys around, Abel would frequently come home at night and say things like this. A home with a small child gets messy, no matter how much you clean up. There might be some differences depending on the house, but ours was like that too. Even if you clean one area, you'll notice another has become messy while you were doing chores. You end up being chased by tasks all day long. I thought this was normal for any household, and whenever Abel scolded me, I would apologize, thinking my housekeeping skills were insufficient. I believed the mess was due to my lack of ability in housekeeping. We came here because you no longer have a home to return to. There's nowhere left for you to escape. Indeed, just before Abel decided to have his parents move in with us, I had lost my mom. My dad had passed away shortly after I got married and Marcy was born. Since then, Mom had been living alone in our family home. While I worried about Mom, I was told, "You're now part of our family." It's unfortunate for Flora, but as she's from another family, she'll have to manage on her own. Convinced by this, I believed I was now a member of Abel's family. The only time I took Marcy to meet my parents was once after she was born. It was a half-day's journey from my parents' home, and they came for her birth celebration, seeing their granddaughter just that once. I can't forget my dad's smiling face, saying she looked like me, or my mom's words that Marcy would surely grow up to be kind. My parents stayed at a hotel, saw newborn Marcy, and then left. That was the last time I saw my dad.
When I wanted to visit my mom living alone, Abel said, "Do you intend to take little Marcy on such a long trip? Don't you love your child?"
So, I gave up on going back home. When Marcy started elementary school and it seemed she could handle a bit of a long journey, my mom passed away alone in her hometown. I cried and regretted, then went back alone for Mom's funeral.
"I have an unavoidable work commitment and can't go. I'm sorry, but you'll have to go alone. Marcy is too young and would only be a nuisance. We'll leave her with a babysitter here."
Though surprised, by that time, I had already come to believe that Abel's words were the right ones. So I felt guilty about leaving my family and rushed to finish my tasks and return home as quickly as possible. I kept Mom's funeral to a minimum. Listening to Haley, I realized how abnormal my situation had been, and how brainwashed I had become, to the point of not noticing it. "I'm really sorry." Haley apologized deeply.
"Why are you telling me this now, after staying silent for 10 years? Why now?"
I was dumbfounded by the truth laid bare before me, yet I couldn't help but direct my burgeoning anger towards Haley.
"I wish I hadn't known about this now. It would have been less miserable to live without knowing anything. Serving Abel and Marcy silently for the rest of my life."
Tears started to overflow without warning. I thought it wasn't too late.
"Not too late?"
"Yes. There's still time." Haley spoke softly, sharing her feelings while looking dejected. "Seeing you being treated like I used to be, I thought I had to stop this cycle of negativity somewhere. You're still young, you can start over." Haley, as she herself said, had been quietly watching me, feeling relieved thinking that now she could be free. As expected, Dewey and Abel's attacks shifted towards me, and their interest in Haley faded away. But gradually, seeing me, she started to see a reflection of herself and thought it was wrong. That she had to do something to help, yet she found it hard to take action. When you think about what your deceased parents would feel seeing you now, how do you think they'd feel knowing their precious daughter is being treated so poorly? Being reminded of my parents, I felt as if my heart was being seized. And then, when Marcy grows up,
She might treat her husband the same way we've been treated, creating another victim. You would have to watch that person suffer as I have. I thought we must stop this cycle.
I discussed with Haley what we should do next. And the time for action came. That weekend, on Saturday morning, Dewey left for an overnight trip with a friend, leaving the house empty. Abel and Marcy had plans to go to Abel's company barbecue on Sunday. After seeing Dewey off, they left me with these instructions.
Make sure you prepare a meal that will impress everyone. Yeah, something that will appeal to the director's son would be good.
It seems Marcy had fallen for the son of a director she met at a company social event.
Right, we'll say Marcy helped make it. That should make the director's son fall for her.
Hearing Abel's words, Marcy blushed. Watching just this interaction, you'd see a normal, beautiful young girl. But I realized she had grown into a person filled with the same poison as her father and grandfather. I couldn't help but sigh.
What, got something to say? If you have a complaint, let's hear it. Really, just living off Dad, totally useless.
I took off my apron and placed it on the table.
Chasing after daily chores and constantly facing verbal abuse, I've become completely exhausted. I'm going back to my parents.
I told Abel and Marcy. But instead of sympathy, their response was,
Huh? Who's going to make our meals then?
Right, a housewife shouldn't slack off on the chores.
Besides, you don't have a home to return to anymore.
There's no one out there who will welcome you back. They looked at each other and laughed at me as if I were a joke.
Got it? I'll say it again. Prepare a meal that will amaze everyone. You can spend as much money as you need, get the expensive ingredients, I'll allow it.
Normally, they'd check the shopping receipts and tell me to save more or that Haley and I should make do with cheaper things. But now they were being unreasonable.
No, I won't make the meal,
I said firmly.
You're defying your husband?
Yes.
Then get out right now.
Understood.
Thank you for everything up to now.
With that, I took my pre-packed bags and left the house. Abel and Marcy looked surprised, probably thinking I'd return soon. But there was no sign they intended to follow me. I walked a bit before calling a taxi and went to a hotel I had decided on beforehand. There, I smiled at someone who was already waiting.
It's good for you. You made the right decision to leave. Yes, I don't know what would have happened if Dewey was there, but it was just the two of them, so I managed to leave.
Haley had sneaked out of the room after Dewey left that morning and checked into the hotel ahead of me. Dewey is more suspicious than Abel and Marcy. If Dewey had been there, he wouldn't have allowed Haley to leave the room, nor would he have allowed me to say what I did. All that's left is to proceed as planned. With my own words finally reclaimed, I said this with a smile. We spent the day relaxing at the hotel, and the next morning, Haley and I headed to my parents' house. Even though no one lives there now, the house is still there. After traveling for half a day and arriving at the nostalgic house, tears involuntarily filled my eyes. If possible, I wished to have returned here while my parents were still alive. To be greeted with smiles.
Let's clean up and make it a livable place again.
Yes. We cleaned earnestly, turning the old house into a comfortable space. Doing chores for ourselves, instead of for those who never saw us as people, felt unbelievably satisfying. After a day of hard work, we took turns showering and then toasted with beer, feeling a satisfying tiredness. Freedom tastes so sweet. Haley smiled at me. That day, Haley had told me to escape alone.
If they notice anything odd about you, they surely won't let you leave. They don't want you to escape. So, I'll stay behind and buy you some time.
But, Haley, you'll suffer.
I'm already past caring.
Haley laughed resignedly.
Besides, I want to make amends for you. I'm really sorry for these 10 years.
At that moment, I saw my deceased mom in Haley's face. The face of a mother concerned and wanting to protect her daughter. Then we planned the escape together, waiting for our chance while acting as if nothing was amiss. Until that day, we both quietly went about our days as if nothing was amiss, waiting for the right moment. As Haley had said, it would have been impossible to escape if all three were together. So, we waited for an opportunity when Dewey was gone. If it was 2 against 2, we thought we could manage somehow. And indeed, we managed to escape exactly as planned. Surely, after I disappeared, Abel and Marcy would try to assign tasks to Haley, only then realizing I wasn't there. Haley was always an ignored presence by the three of them. If we disappeared before they noticed, we would win. And we won that bet. Just in case, I had disposed of anything that could indicate the location of my parents' house. Abel, who had only visited once before our marriage, had never bothered to remember its location. Even if he tried to search, he wouldn't know where to start. I turned off the location services on my mobile phone and powered it down. I decided to turn it on. As expected, there were dozens of voicemails. I played them, just in case. All the messages were the same.
Where are you? Come back, or else. Do you think this is okay? What about the house? I'll forgive you now, so respond. I'm serious, I'll get angry. Where are you? Fulfill your duties as a housewife. Don't you care about your daughter? You. Neglecting your child.
It's astonishing how they keep repeating the same things without learning. I listened to the voicemails in order, amazed, but then a call came through and I accidentally answered.
Hey, you finally picked up. Where are you? Come back and take care of the house.
I immediately hung up, but then Marcy called.
What are you doing? Come back and make dinner.
Of course, I hung up right away. But the calls kept coming, over and over. Because they were so persistent, I decided to respond. This number is currently in use. Please check the number and call again. Furthermore, the number will be changed immediately, so you will not be able to reach me ever again. After saying that, I turned off my mobile phone. Time to get a new phone contract immediately. Soon after, I decided to sell that house. Yes, I was the owner of that house. It was bought with the insurance money after my dad passed away, but since Mom was the beneficiary, she bought it and leased it to our family. When Mom passed away, I inherited it, so it became mine by default. Abel, who always looked down on me, had completely forgotten about this. Perhaps he also forgot because, despite calling it a lease, he never actually paid any rent. I received a call from the real estate agent handling the sale, and though Abel tried to contact me in a fury, I informed them that any further communications would go through my lawyer, and then I canceled my old mobile phone. I played my last card by sending them the recordings of Abel and his friend's verbal abuse left on that mobile phone, offering mercy by saying I wouldn't take it to court if they just left immediately. Abel and Dewey, I couldn't care less about. But Marcy, she's still my daughter. I wanted to keep a door open for Marcy, in case she decided to change her ways. Despite some resistance from Abel and Dewey, they eventually agreed to the divorce. They didn't want a court battle, and it seemed they only really cared about their blood relatives. Anyone else being out of the picture didn't bother them. The fear of their abusive words, recorded after I woke up, becoming public might have also played a big part. After all, Abel and Dewey always cared a lot about their public image. They wanted to avoid any further damage to their reputation. To maintain appearances and prevent future issues, they followed the terms of a notarized agreement we made. paying the agreed alimony and quickly leaving the house. Abel had quite a bit to say about expecting to receive half the money from selling the house, but the inheritance I received was mine. And no amount of complaining from him would change that it wasn't subject to division. Thus, I was able to start a new life with Haley. At first, Haley hesitated, saying, "I was part of the reason you suffered." But if Haley hadn't told me to run away back then, I'd still be living a humiliating life. For that alone, I'm grateful. Despite the connection forged through that marriage, now the only person I can call mom is her, which led me to suggest we live together. A non-blood related mother and daughter living together doesn't seem so strange in today's world. And then there's Marcy, related by blood to both Haley and me, who started saying through a lawyer that she wanted to live with us too.
Grandpa and Dad always tell me to take care of the house. It's terrible. I want to leave this house and live with Mom too.
That was her reasoning. Essentially, she didn't want to deal with household chores or errands, and that's why she wanted to live with me. This wasn't right. I decided to push Marcy away with a heavy heart. Living together now would only have Marcy repeating the same behaviors as Dewey and Abel. If Marcy truly realizes her mistakes and decides to change, I'll welcome her with open arms. I believe that's also a form of maternal love. For now, Marcy and I only communicate through letters via a lawyer. Her letters are filled with complaints and grievances against Dewey and Abel, along with resentments towards Haley and me for leaving. But I'm waiting for the day when the content of those letters changes, and we can meet face to face as family again. Even if it's difficult now, I look forward to the day, filling each day with pieces that connect us. I believe that day will come. By then, Haley, who isn't related by blood, and I will have Marcy as a bridge connecting us.
"Thanks for quitting," Emily sneered and looked at me. I just silently stared back at Emily. "It's about cutting labor costs. We don't need a hag who exploits overtime pay at our company." Tom seemed pleased too. A week later, I kept getting calls from the company. "Hello?" As soon as I answered, the president spoke. "Who exactly are you?" I laughed mockingly at the president's words. "I am Lily Johnson. I turned 59 this year. I've been working at this company for 37 years since graduating from college. Our company is staffed with administrative scriveners, social insurance labor consultants, and tax accountants, handling clerical work for our clients. This is especially popular with company presidents who run their businesses alone. These presidents are busy with sales and lack the time for clerical work, so our company takes care of it for them. I belong to the tax department. I got my bookkeeping and tax accountant qualifications during my school days. That's why I joined this company. Now I'm managing 45 clients, which keeps me quite busy. Even though a part-timer handles the accounting entries, it's still overwhelming. But I can't show any weakness. Our clients are all long-term relationships, and many of them have had their fair share of hardships. Seeing them face adversity, I feel I can't lose either. So here I am, in front of my computer again today. Lately, I've been troubled. Tom and Emily have been subjecting me to insidious harassment. Tom, 7 years younger than me, is the head of the tax department. He used to be just a regular colleague, but his attitude changed drastically 3 months ago when he got promoted. He used to speak politely, but suddenly he started talking down to me. "Lily, what are you doing? You've got some nerve slacking off during work hours." He's always either sarcastic or complaining. I'm looking at documents for tax-saving strategies for our clients. Even when I retort, Tom remains unfazed. "Just check the manual for that. Don't do anything unnecessary. And if you end up working overtime, don't expect to get paid for it." Tom glared at me with those words. Unable to respond, Emily, Tom's assistant, chimed in. "Lily, you should work more efficiently. At this rate, you'll never finish. That's why you're still a rank-and-file employee." Emily laughed mockingly. I was the first to be offered the promotion to department head, but I declined at the time. Becoming a head meant more time for management and less for client interaction. However, it was an internal offer, so Tom and Emily don't know about it. "I'll make sure to complete my regular duties as well." That was all I could manage to say. Still, Tom and Emily's harassment continued. "You're increasing overtime again? What a waste of overtime pay." Tom's angry voice echoed again today. "Lily, cut it out. Your constant overtime is dragging down the whole tax department's performance." Emily sighed as she spoke. The reason for yesterday's overtime was simple. Tom had accumulated a month's worth of declaration forms to be filed by the end of the month. After work yesterday, Tom suddenly said, "Take care of these." He left several client files on my desk. I turned pale when I saw the files. "Wait, these all have deadlines this month, right?" As I said this in confusion, Tom was already nowhere near. Looking for him, I saw he was already packing up at his desk. "I'm heading out. Take care." With that, Tom quickly left the office. "Good luck, okay?" Emily followed Tom out, laughing mockingly. Unbelievable. I sighed and opened the client files left on my desk. Moreover, some of the files were Emily's responsibility. I sighed even deeper. I knew why Tom was harassing me, because they wanted me to retire quickly. I have more experience and deeper knowledge in taxation than him. As a result, other members of the tax department come to me with their questions instead of Tom. There are other reasons why everyone avoids Tom. He looks greasy and unapproachable. The only female employee who stays near him is Emily. Tom likes young women. That's probably why he wants me to retire, to get the other female employees to rely on him more. It's such shallow thinking. It gives me chills. There's also the fact that he simply doesn't like me. Emily was harassing me to curry favor with Tom. Tom is the one who evaluates the performance of the tax department, so she probably wanted to undermine me to get a good evaluation from him. Anyway, I have to manage these declarations. Not only do I have to prepare the tax declarations for my assigned companies, but it looks like I won't be able to finish today's work either. But if I try to claim overtime, I'll just get complaints from Tom and Emily. I resigned myself to unpaid overtime. Then one day, I was suddenly called to the president's office. Our company had just had a change of president. Originally, the president's father had been managing the company since its founding, and it had only recently been handed over to his son. The son had always worked at another company and still wasn't fully acquainted with our company. But it couldn't be helped since the former president had suddenly fallen ill and he had to take over. "Excuse me." As soon as I entered the president's office, I noticed Tom and Emily. And for some reason, they both had unpleasant smirks on their faces. "Why are Tom and the others here?" I muttered quietly enough that no one else would hear. In this tense and strange atmosphere, the president spoke. "Lily, we'll need you to resign by the end of this month." "Excuse me? What do you mean?" I asked the president, my mind in a whirl. "I heard from Tom and Emily. You've been overbilling for overtime, right? Other members of the tax department have only about 15 hours of overtime per month, but Lily, you're already over 80 hours. Don't you find that odd? Tom and Emily have 0 overtime this month. Impressive, right?" The president looked at me sternly. The reason my overtime was so high this month was that I was doing Tom and Emily's work. But if I said it was Tom's instructions, it would seem like my own inability to manage time. So I just stated the facts. I haven't overbilled for overtime. It's a result of not being able to finish my work within regular hours. Then the president sighed deeply. I'm doubtful, but there's no evidence, so I won't pursue it further. However, we can't continue to employ someone who works that slowly, so I want you to resign. The president's mind seemed made up. Me being told to leave the company I had dedicated my entire 37-year career to. I was tired too. No matter how much more I did beyond my own work, it was never appreciated. Instead, I ended up having to take on Tom and Emily's work as well. Yes, I understand. I'll resign at the end of this month. I realized I had already said that to the president. I glanced at Tom and Emily. They were smiling vulgarly, looking very pleased. After leaving the president's office with the three of them, Emily looked at me and said, "Thanks for quitting." Emily sneered and looked at me. I just silently stared back at Emily. Tom also looked down on me in the same way. "We're cutting labor costs. We don't need a hag who exploits overtime pay in our company." Tom seemed pleased too. While watching the two of them talk so cheerily, I thought about the handover process, and then started creating the handover documents for all my clients. Of course, I didn't miss saying goodbye to the people I was handing over to. I tried to get an appointment with the president to say goodbye in person. For the presidents I couldn't meet, I sent letters and informed them of my successor. A week after I resigned, I was relaxing at home. I had been busy with the handover until my resignation, and I had been extremely busy even before that. A little relaxation shouldn't be a problem. As I was thinking this, my mobile phone rang. When I checked the call, it was from the company. What could they want now? I made sure to take care of the social insurance procedures. I didn't answer the phone, but then the company called several more times. In fact, I had also received several calls from Tom and Emily's personal mobile phones. Maybe they thought I'd answer if it was from the company. Reluctantly, I decided to answer. "Hello? Lily, it's a mess right now." As soon as I answered, the president spoke. "Who exactly are you?" I laughed mockingly at the president's words. "Who am I? Just an unemployed lady. I've resigned from the company and I'm nothing else, right?" Then the president spoke urgently. "Since Lily left, we've had 49 calls to stop transactions with the company. Please come back to the company immediately." The president said his piece and hung up. He must be really panicked. I guess I have no choice. I got up reluctantly and headed to the company. As soon as I arrived, Tom and Emily were waiting. Both of their faces were pale. They both had dark circles under their eyes. "What's wrong with both of you?" I asked, surprised at their drastic change in appearance. Then Tom glared at me and said, "Since then we've been getting calls one after another to stop transactions. Not just from your clients, but from prospective companies we were planning to introduce. What did you do?" Emily also looked at me with suspicion. "I never thought Lily would do something so underhanded. I'm truly disillusioned." The reason they both looked so haggard was probably due to dealing with the cancellations. Probably the body. Of course, I hadn't done anything to the clients. But I had a guess why they were canceling their transactions. Well, the cancellations might be unavoidable this time. As I muttered this, Tom yelled, "So you did do something, didn't you? Get to the president's office now." I was then taken to the president's office by Tom. "President, I brought her," Tom declared with force as he opened the door. Emily followed in a hurry. "Oh, I've been waiting." The president looked me in the eyes as he spoke. Tom accused me as if I was the culprit. "It appears that Lily was involved in the cessation of transactions with our clients. We should not only make her resign, but also sue her for damages," Emily argued vehemently. Though her language was careful in front of the president ignored them and asked me, "Why did so many companies stop transactions after Lily left?" I took a deep breath and answered clearly. "Don't you understand? Our clients don't need us to manage their taxes. There are tax accountant firms that do it cheaper. Yet they continued with us because I was here." Tom snapped at me. "What's with that attitude towards the president? And you think you're worth that much?" Emily also taunted, "There's no way it has to be Lily." The president looked serious. Tom and Emily work based on the manual, optimizing operations. But I do more than that. I offer tax-saving strategies tailored to our clients' situations. Uniform responses don't always serve the client's best interests. In fact, many clients preferred my approach and stayed because of it. Tom got angry at my explanation. "How can we afford to give such detailed attention to each case? It takes too much time." "That's right, it's inefficient," Emily strongly agreed. Then the president sighed deeply and said, "Actually, I just got a call from Dad, the former president. Some of the clients who stopped transactions had gone directly to Dad to negotiate about Lily." I was surprised to hear this. I hadn't expected the clients to go that far for me. Dad said that the tax department was viable because of Lily. She not only managed her clients but also supported her colleagues' clients, and she has knowledge that Tom can't match. Dad also said that if Lily hadn't declined, she would have been in a higher position than a department head by now. The president spoke with a pained expression. "No way!" Emily looked shocked. She probably couldn't believe I might have been her boss. The president continued, "I'm really sorry to have made you resign once, but can we revoke your resignation? Lily, you're needed at our company. My father also strongly said so." I was honestly happy about the president's changed opinion, but I couldn't accept it. Then Tom interrupted our conversation. "President, what do you mean? She's better than me? I can't accept this." Tom was visibly upset. Emily also protested. "Tom is a wonderful boss who cares for his subordinates, and yet you choose Lily over him? That's unacceptable." The president then looked sternly at them. "Actually, since Lily resigned, we've been receiving numerous complaints from the tax department. You two seem to have been pushing your work onto others, haven't you?" "What? Why would you—" Tom's face turned pale. The president started speaking with a look of disgust. "I've heard from the employees. Tom, you've been pushing the preparation of your clients' declaration forms onto your subordinates, haven't you? Including Emily's work for many clients." Next to Tom, who was getting paler, Emily trembled when her name was mentioned. "There was a leak saying you've been pushing your work onto Lily until she resigned. Tom, you were calling her a salary thief. It seems the roles are reversed, aren't they?" The president spoke with a sigh. "No, that's not—" Tom was visibly flustered, seemingly unable to come up with an excuse. Observing Tom and Emily turning pale together, the president continued. "Also, there was a leak that you two are in a relationship. You were often seen leaving work together. But Tom, you're married, aren't you?" The president glared at Tom and Emily. "I was just mentoring Emily as her superior, nothing inappropriate." Tom struggled to find the words when the president produced several receipts. "These are receipts queried by the accounting department. These dining expenses filed by Tom. Who were they with? Certainly not with clients, right?" Tom was sweating profusely, unable to speak. Emily's face turned ghostly pale. "Tom and Emily, you've neglected your duties and inflated expense claims. Plus, you're having an affair in the office despite being married. According to company policy, I'm terminating your employment as of today." The president told them calmly and straightforwardly. Tom and Emily tried to resist. "Please wait, I'll retract the receipt claims. Just don't fire me. I have a family." Tom desperately tried to reverse his firing. Emily did the same. "Please, I don't want to be fired. I'll apologize to Lily and the others for dumping work on them." Emily was on the verge of tears. Realizing the severity of being fired for neglecting work and having an affair with a supervisor, she must have been worried about her reputation. I advised Tom and them. "Why don't you just stop resisting? It's undignified." Tom glared at me. "Shut up. What would a single person like you understand?" I sighed and said, "Tom, you were the one who got me fired. It's just karma. What goes around comes around. Why don't you take some responsibility and reflect a bit? Damn it. Tom looked frustrated. Emily bit her lip. And I haven't reported this yet, but there's more to Tom and Emily's misconduct. Should I share more details? I asked the president with a smile. Tom and Emily's behavior was well known in the tax department. Their stories had reached me, whether I liked it or not. No, please don't. Lily, stop! Both were frantically trying to stop me. I gave them an ultimatum. Wrongdoings eventually come to light. It would be better for you to face reality before it gets worse. At my words, both of them collapsed to their knees. Ultimately, Tom and Emily were fired on the spot. I revealed their misdeeds afterward. These included Tom faking business trips to go out with Emily for days and harassing employees they disliked into quitting. I tried to help those employees, but Tom and Emily's tactics were insidious. They repeatedly reprimanded and pressured employees out of my sight. It was also common for them to suddenly assign work with tight deadlines. The employees who resigned asked me to keep quiet. But now they are happily working at other companies, so I decided it was okay to speak up. The president was furious at my revelation. He expressed his anger about cutting their final salary. He also planned to thoroughly investigate past inflated expense claims. Tom was begging the president, tears in his eyes. Please don't cut my salary. What will I tell my family if they find out? Eventually, Tom and Emily's affair was exposed to Tom's wife. Tom ended up getting divorced. The two are now facing claims for compensation in the divorce lawsuit. I know this because, for some reason, Tom contacted me. Please, can you persuade the president to reconsider the firing? Emily and I are in a real bind now. Apparently, Tom and Emily are struggling to find new jobs. The tax industry is somewhat insular. If you commit too many misdeeds, word spreads quickly through the industry's network. That's why no one is willing to hire Tom and them. However, they need money for the divorce compensation and living expenses. So now they're working day labor, like at construction sites. People used to office work suddenly doing hard labor outdoors must be tough. Emily often calls me crying. Lily, please help. I just wanted a raise and a better life. I never really liked Tom, and this situation is unbearable, Emily would say, crying. However, Tom and Emily's predicament is their own doing. Many people, including myself, have been victims of their actions. So I told Emily, "This is all your own fault, Emily. You can't unring a bell. It will be hard to return to the same path. You're just going to have to deal with the hardships." "No way!" Emily cried out in despair. This was the outcome of Emily's actions. I hope she continues to regret her actions in the future. As for me, I'm still enjoying a relaxed lifestyle away from work. Please come back. The president has been begging for me to return, but I have declined. After being told once to resign, I don't think I'll go back. Sometimes I help out at a friend's tax office to earn a bit of money. Maybe once things settle down, I'll start my own office like my friend. In my own office, no one can complain about my working style. I can fully dedicate myself to my clients. As a tax accountant, I want to be on equal footing with my clients, not as a teacher, but as part of the service industry. My second life has just begun. I'm looking forward to delving into what I want to do next.
We were invited by my brother. Since he called us, we're not going to pay any rent or utilities, so we're counting on you, Ashley. I work in the finance sector. My husband, who I'll call Bob, is a car mechanic, and we live in my childhood home. By childhood home, I don't mean that my parents live there. Actually, my family home is a long-standing family business where my father used to be the CEO. I have a brother, and he was originally planned to take over my father's company, so he majored in economics in college. On top of that, my talented brother studied abroad at Oxford University, learned more about business management, returned to the United States, and worked with my father for several years. Eventually, my parents wanted to enjoy their retirement and moved to a place like Aspen, Colorado, seeming to enjoy their relaxed life surrounded by nature. Since my brother was given the company in return, my parents passed down the family home to me, their daughter, and I decided to live there with my husband. The house is conveniently located with excellent access to public transportation, less than a 5-minute walk from the train station. Commercial facilities, hospitals, and schools are also within walking distance. Considering the future, when our children leave the nest, we will be able to live comfortably, so in that sense, I am grateful that my parents gave me this house. We were planning on expanding our family and living happily, but we never thought that our life would come to a sudden end because of such an incident. After moving into this house, my mother-in-law started to visit frequently. Knowing that my parents run a business, my mother-in-law often asks about money since we got married. "Hey, Ashley, how much assets do your parents have? When your parents pass away, how much will you inherit?" She often talks about these things, and I couldn't help but think that she was rather distasteful. I didn't want to be too blunt, so I replied, I wonder how much. I've never really thought about it, so I don't know. I've already received the house, so I might not get any money." Although I laughed and responded lightly, she said, "That can't be true, can it? Your parents are over 60. You never know what might happen. They must have discussed their assets with you." She seemed to be so interested in the asset discussion that at that moment I was convinced that she was counting on my parents' wealth. I already know how much I will receive, but I decided to keep silent, thinking it would be better not to tell my mother-in-law or my husband, who is close to her. However, an unthinkable incident occurred after this. Suddenly, without any notice, my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family moved into our house. Around 8 a.m. on a holiday, the doorbell rang unexpectedly, and when I opened the door, there were movers. "Huh? Why are the movers here?" As I was surprised and confused, my mother-in-law and my brother-in-law's family arrived and said, "We're going to be living here from today, so please take care of us." When I saw their grinning faces, I got chills down my spine. Just then, my husband woke up, and when I asked him to explain the situation, he said nonchalantly, "What's the problem if Mom and the others move into this house? It's so spacious, so you should be able to spare some room." He spoke as if it was only natural to give them some space. I was surprised enough that we were living together, but then my sister-in-law said something even more outrageous. "We were invited by your brother, Ashley. Since he called us, we're not going to pay any rent or utilities, so we're counting on you, Ashley." About my brother-in-law, he intruded into various rooms without permission and said, "This room has good sunlight, so give it to us. Bob, move all the stuff in here out to the hallway." I felt dizzy at this exchange. This is my house, but they are opening rooms here and there, trying to use them as their own. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law's family have been lacking common sense for a while, especially my sister-in-law, who had rummaged through my bag without permission before. If things continue like this, they'll take over my room. Enough is enough. This is my house. Why are you acting like you own this place? I've had it. I want everyone to get out. I normally don't lose my cool or raise my voice in anger, but having these people move into the house my parents gave me without permission and treating it like it was theirs was something I could not stand. That's why I lost control of my emotions and shouted at all 3 of them, but then something unexpected happened. "How dare you talk to us like that? You're the one who should get out." The moment those words were spoken, I felt a severe pain in my cheek. Wait, did I get slapped? I realized what had happened a few seconds after being hit. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what had happened, and all that was left was a throbbing pain in my cheek. At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. It goes without saying, I can't live with people who would do something like this, but this house is mine. I don't want them living here like parasites. I packed up my things to leave the house, intending to inform my family about this. I had to find a place far away from home, so I rented a monthly apartment for the time being. From there, I would have to commute to work. The moment I told my parents about it over the phone, I could tell they were furious, even through the phone, especially my dad. He is very doting and has always adored me and my brother. He was a strict CEO, but as a father, he was always kind and quick to help when we were in trouble. I didn't want to involve my parents, who were just about to retire, in something like this, but I was forced to because my inherited house was being taken away from me while I was living in the monthly apartment. I was sure that my husband and his family were freely using my house, so I decided to do something that my brother and father suggested. A few days later, I checked my phone during my break and found dozens of missed calls and messages from my husband. Well, I knew why he was calling. I had called the water company and the electric company to cut off the utilities. Our house is all electric, so nothing works without electricity, and we haven't installed solar panels yet, so there's no way to supply electricity. It's very hot right now, so it must be pretty tough without electricity and water. The calls from my husband were probably to do something about it. Just as I was about to ignore it, my husband called again, timing it perfectly with my break. "Hey, what's going on? There's no electricity and the water isn't working. You stopped the electricity and water, didn't you?" I could clearly imagine the panicked state my husband was in from his voice over the phone. The house is mine, so now that I'm gone, there's no way I can leave the electricity and water on, right? That's why I had it cut off. If I left the utilities on, I would have to pay the bills even though I'm not living there. I can't accept that, so naturally I had it cut off. At this, my husband was furious and demanded that I renew the contract immediately. Just because he says to renew it doesn't mean I'm going to say, "Okay, I understand." If they want to renew it, they should do it with their own money. But whenever it comes to this, they always say things like, "It's your house, so you should pay." So their words and actions don't match. Anyway, I have no intention of renewing the contract or paying. If you don't like it, then get out of the house right away. After saying only that, I hung up the phone because my break was ending. Afterwards, my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my brother-in-law all called me. All of them were saying the same thing. They wanted me to get the electricity and water hooked up. Their room was hot and uncomfortable. They said it was inconvenient without water. But all of this was their problem, not mine. After listening to everything they said, I told them to handle it themselves and hung up the phone. I figured they were just greedy for money and thought they would give up and leave soon. However, even after a week passed, there was no sign of them leaving. So I decided to push them further. I consulted with my father's company's lawyer about the situation and asked him to send a notice to my husband. The content of the notice was about trespassing. They had barged into the house I owned without any consultation, drove me out of it, and were using it as their own. I explained to the four of them, who used this malicious tactic, that I was considering taking legal action. Hey, what's going on? Why did I get such a document from a lawyer? Was it necessary to go this far? My husband, who seemed panicked and not expecting me to go this far, came to me for a settlement. Knowing how concerned they are about their public image, the prospect of being sued would be extremely damaging to them mentally. They definitely want to avoid dealing with a lawyer at all costs, but they don't want to give up their current lifestyle. So they're probably scheming to persuade me to let them continue their current lifestyle. I can see through what my husband is thinking like it's in the palm of my hand. That said, there's no way I can listen to what they have to say, so I didn't comply with my husband. At this, my husband finally exploded in anger, forgetting that he was at work, and yelled at me loudly. "Cut it out! Are you getting carried away? Just because we're a little underhanded doesn't mean you can act so high and mighty. Go back to how things were right now and drop the lawyer." Even though he yelled in anger, it didn't affect me at all. On the contrary, I was annoyed by his phone call, thinking, "Who do you think you are, taking over someone else's house? No matter what you say or shout at me, my feelings won't change. If you continue to squat there, I will take legal action. You better think hard before you act." Over the phone, my husband was still shrieking, but I ignored him and hung up the phone. This is a waste of time, and I've already talked to my lawyer about divorce. When I got home, I'd received calls from my mother-in-law and sister-in-law, but I knew they were just going to talk about settling the matter. I didn't want to waste any more time, so I blocked their numbers to prevent further calls. After that, my prideful husband's family couldn't bear the idea of being sued, so they packed their bags and vacated the house. Then, the lawyer intervened, and the divorce negotiations proceeded smoothly. I also had a house cleaning service come in, and finally I was able to return to my sparkling clean house. Living apart from my husband's family, and in a monthly rental was comfortable. But of course, living in my own home is the best. The house is pretty worn down in some places, so I need to consider renovating soon. I consulted with my father, and he introduced me to a good contractor, so I started consulting about the renovation. Living alone is really comfortable. I'm not bound by anyone. I can lie around on the sofa without getting scolded. I can eat whatever I want without anyone saying anything. And while I was enjoying my current life, I received a contact from my ex-husband for the first time in 3 months. At first, I didn't answer the phone because I didn't recognize the number. But when the call kept coming from the same number, I thought it might be from a contractor, so I reluctantly answered the phone. However, as soon as I recognized the voice, my mood was completely ruined. It was from my ex-husband, whom I had divorced 3 months ago. I had already divorced him with the intervention of a lawyer. We even made a promise never to approach each other again, so what on earth does he want now? And changing his phone number just to call me is strange, no matter how you look at it. We promised, through our lawyer, not to see or contact each other again. There's nothing left for us to talk about, so please don't contact me anymore. Right as I was about to hang up the phone, "Hold on a minute, please. I just need you to listen. Just for a little while. I'm begging you." With that, he started yapping without any permission from me. Apparently, my ex-husband's company is facing serious financial crisis, and it's decided that his salary will be reduced. My mother-in-law's health is not good, and she is unable to work. My sister-in-law and her husband can't contribute to the living expenses since he isn't working a steady job. My sister-in-law is working multiple part-time jobs, but most of her paycheck is being used to pay off the debt that my brother-in-law made. The situation was desperate as my ex-husband was trying hard to make ends meet. But with his salary getting cut, it will become increasingly difficult to survive. Well, hearing all that, I couldn't think of anything but, "Okay, is that so? Because they intruded into my house without my permission, did whatever they pleased, and then tried to kick me out? It's simply unbelievable. I feel nothing for the people who did such a thing, and I have no sympathy for them. Even if you tell me these things, it doesn't solve anything. It's your family. You should deal with it yourself. There's nothing I can do about it. There's nothing I can do." At my words, my ex-husband started to panic even more. "Don't say things like that. We're in serious trouble. We won't even be able to pay the rent for the apartment, and we'll be struggling for food tomorrow. Hey, we used to be a family, right? Please help us." He pleaded in a voice close to crying, but I was not convinced. When I was in trouble, he did nothing to help, and he looked down on me along with my mother-in-law. Just like my mother-in-law, my sister-in-law, and my brother-in-law have also always looked down on me. They insulted me for my plain appearance, or for my old-fashioned way of thinking. They told me not to come around because they said I was so stiff and outdated that it was rubbing off on them, and they didn't care how hurt I was. As for my mother-in-law, she not only made things worse, but she also pushed me to have a baby as soon as possible, forced strange herbal medicines on me, made unnecessary doctor's appointments, and told all the neighbors that I was a barren wife. Looking back, there wasn't a single good thing about my marriage. My ex-husband, who used to be so kind before we got married, started to become my mother-in-law's puppet after the wedding. The first day my mother-in-law stormed into our house, I was out because I had an appointment. Apparently, my mother-in-law was upset by this and cried to my husband, "I wanted to see Ashley, but she wasn't there. I want to be friends with Ashley. I'm sad." After hearing his mother cry, my ex-husband yelled at me without listening to my side of the story. She said that she wanted to get along, but all she ever did when we met was badmouth me. "My son seems to have lost weight recently. Is it because your cooking is so bad that he can't eat properly?" She said things like this loudly, whether we were at home or outside, so there was no way we could get along. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law also joined in, laughing at me. I can't help people who act like this anymore. No matter what you say, my feelings won't change. I can't help you guys, so I'm going to hang up now. And don't ever contact me again. With that, I finally hung up the phone and blocked the new number. Knowing my ex-husband, he might change his number and try to contact me again. So, I decided to change my phone number at the store over the weekend. But, before that, those 4 took action. They broke the promise with the lawyer and suddenly came to my house at 11 p.m. "Open up, let us in and take care of us." We're family. You should help us. They were banging on the door, yelling without considering the time. Hey, what's the matter at this hour? Please go back home as it's causing a nuisance to the neighbors. When I went to open the door, they seemed ready to barge in, so I figured I'd try talking through the intercom. But the four of them didn't care, started banging on the door and raising a ruckus. I couldn't believe I was dealing with people this out of control. I was left holding my head in my hands. I was considering calling the cops when I heard sirens from outside. It looked like a neighbor had taken the initiative. As soon as they heard the police sirens, the surprised group thought I had called the police and tried to run away. But by then, a crowd had gathered, and escape was not an option. And so, the four of them were escorted to the police station by the responding officers. I was questioned about the incident, and I explained everything that had happened. After that, the word about what my ex-husband and his pals had done spread quickly in the neighborhood. It turned out that among the crowd that had gathered was a co-worker of my ex-husband's, so by the next day, the whole office knew what had happened. He was already having a hard time because of a pay cut, but after getting the police involved, the company wasn't going to let it slide. My ex-husband ended up getting fired and couldn't afford to pay his apartment rent anymore. Money issues caused a rift between him and his sister's family, so their group living situation ended. Now, Bob is living in public housing with his mother, working multiple part-time jobs to make ends meet. Even his mother has started working part-time a few days a week, desperate to earn money.
My name is Sarah Smith, a 26-year-old full-time housewife. I've been married for 3 years, and we don't have a child yet. My husband's name is Aaron, a 30-year-old office worker. We met when I was working as a receptionist at a company, and he approached me as he was from one of our clients. We dated for 2 years before getting married. Before we got married, there was no mention of living with his parents, but as soon as our marriage was decided, my mother-in-law insisted on living together. I told my husband that I didn't want to live together during our newlywed days, but he said, "You'll be working as a housewife, and I'll be working at the company." Fair enough. Then he showed me his palm in front of my face and gestured for me to stop talking. I reluctantly agreed to live together, thinking it might be inevitable, since I was marrying the eldest son. After we decided to get married, we planned to visit the wedding venue together, but my mother-in-law always came with my husband. I felt uncomfortable when my mother-in-law started interfering with the wedding plans, and even my husband's attire. I looked at my husband, and I couldn't help but think, is he marrying his mother? He seems so happy about it. Honestly, I felt down, thinking, I'm going to live with a mama's boy and his mother. Since I couldn't stand feeling this way, I asked my husband when we were alone, "Aaron, are you a mama's boy by any chance?" He looked puzzled and asked why. I told him, because usually couples decide on wedding plans together, and I've never heard of a mother coming along and interfering. He replied, "She just had some free time and came along. It's not meddling, it's advice. Don't worry about it, and I'm not a mama's boy." When he asked, "What would you do if I were a mama's boy?" I replied, "I wouldn't marry you. It would feel too uncomfortable, right? It's better to stop the wedding now for our future." I answered honestly. My husband said, "I'm not a mama's boy, and I'll protect you if my mother does anything to you," and laughed. So I decided to trust him and go ahead with the marriage. After that day, my mother-in-law never came to the wedding venue again. We had our wedding, moved our belongings into our room at his parents' house, and left for our honeymoon. When we returned and tried to unpack, we found that our room had already been tidied up. I was surprised to see that the furniture, which I had planned to buy later, was already set up. Everything from curtains to bedding was ready, and the room was prepared for us to live in immediately. I couldn't find my belongings, so I asked my husband about them. He replied, "You'll have to ask my mother. I don't know." So I went downstairs to ask my mother-in-law. I said, "Thank you for tidying up our room, but I can't find my things. Do you know where they are?" She replied, "Oh, your stuff? I threw away everything. I thought it was unnecessary." I said, "My bank book and other valuable items were also in there." She assured me, "Don't worry, I'm keeping them safe. Everything else has been thrown away." I was taken aback, but said to my mother-in-law, "These are my personal belongings. Please give them back. The bank book is from when I was single, so they belong to me." Reaching out my hand to her, my mother-in-law made a sour face. "How dare you defy me? A mere daughter-in-law. Fine, I will give you your bank book. Wait here." She stomped off with a loud footfall to fetch them. When she returned, she tossed my bank book on the floor. Frantically, I checked the contents and found that a whopping $10,000 had been withdrawn. "Mother-in-law, did you withdraw $10,000? I asked, to which she nonchalantly replied, "Of course, I bought your furniture, didn't I?" I was at a loss for words. I quickly returned to my room, and while seething with anger, relayed this incident to my husband Aaron. Aaron, however, responded, "Ah, so she bought this furniture. Thanks." I lost my temper at his response. "Hey, using my savings without permission is a crime. And to top it all off, this hideous furniture and curtains? Who wouldn't be angry?" Seeing my anger, Aaron said, "I'll go talk to my mom," and left to speak with his mother. I regretted deciding to live together, as I dreaded what might come next. As I looked around, the curtains adorned with large roses against a pink background, the cheap-looking wardrobe that reminded me of my childhood, every sight made me sigh. Exhausted, I lay down on the bed. The cover was cherry-patterned. Whether it was an act of spite or kindness, I couldn't tell, but it made me sad. While I was feeling this way, Aaron returned from speaking with his mother. She's angry and wouldn't listen. He said, "She says she didn't deserve to be complained about when she did all of this out of goodwill." I asked him, aghast, "Don't you feel sad looking at this furniture? These curtains and the bed cover?" Aaron looked around the room, his face paling. "Let's change it a bit, without her noticing," he said, trying to placate me. "And the money? Will I get the money back?" I asked. I was not working hard and saving my money for such frivolous things. Aaron apologized on his mother's behalf and said he would repay me bit by bit from his salary and bonus. I also apologized to Aaron for starting a fight with his mother on our first day living together, and despite not wanting to, told him I would apologize to his mother. When I apologized to her, saying, "Mother-in-law, I'm sorry for my rude remarks earlier," she replied, "So you're the type to complain about even the smallest things. But remember, if you defy me again, there will be consequences." She forgave me for the incident. The next morning, my mother-in-law woke me up at 4 a.m. She told me to buy bread from a bakery in the neighboring town that opens at 5 a.m. Considering yesterday's incident, I simply said yes and decided to go to the bakery. I wanted to ride my bike, but I couldn't find the key. I thought the key might still be on the bicycle, so I went outside, but the bicycle was nowhere to be found. It had probably been thrown away, so I decided to go for a run to the bakery. I changed into my sneakers, put on my favorite tunes, and ran through the city streets in the early morning. It felt wonderful. Returning with freshly bought bread, I was about to take a shower when my mother-in-law stopped me. "You're not working, so no need for the shower. Just wipe off your sweat with a towel," she scolded, throwing a towel at me. Realizing that she was still upset about yesterday, I gave up on the idea of showering. I prepared breakfast for my in-laws and my husband, checking the ingredients in the fridge. I enjoy cooking and can decide on a menu just by looking at the available ingredients. Although there weren't many, I managed to prepare breakfast, woke up my husband, and informed my in-laws that breakfast was ready. When my in-laws and husband sat at the table, I was about to join them when my mother-in-law said, "You can't eat with us. You're the daughter-in-law, right? You should eat after we're finished and the cleanup is done." And she wouldn't let me sit at the table. I looked at my husband, but he avoided my gaze, acting as if he didn't know what was happening. Are these house rules from the 1950s? I muttered to myself. But I obeyed my mother-in-law nonetheless. When my husband was leaving, he mouthed, "Sorry," to me and bowed his head in apology. I couldn't help but chuckle at his gesture. I thought to myself, my husband isn't considerate, and I need to make this house a place he wants to come back to. I told my mother-in-law, "I'll start with the cleaning," and began to tidy up. She was sitting on the couch, occasionally glancing my way, but never responding. Because my mother-in-law was around, I decided to clean the living room last, keeping busy with laundry and cleaning the rest of the house. When only the living room was left, I noticed my mother-in-law was gone. After the cleaning was done and I was about to make some tea, I noticed the small window next to the fridge was open, and I could hear my mother-in-law's voice. It seemed she was talking with a neighbor. As I casually sipped my tea, I realized she was talking about me. She was telling the neighbor that I had taken her bank book and she had no money to spend freely. Unable to hold back, I confronted my mother-in-law when she returned to the house. "Please, don't lie to the neighbors. When did I ever take your bank book?" I asked. Startled, she quickly closed the window and yelled, "Just do whatever you want," before storming off to her bedroom. Realizing that this could create an uncomfortable situation for my husband, caught between his mother and me, I decided to try and be more understanding towards my mother-in-law. But she continued to act as if I wasn't there. Even when I tried to engage her in conversation, she ignored me as if I were invisible. My father-in-law was also a non-entity, unable to oppose his domineering wife. He was the head of a veterinary clinic, a quiet man who started talking to me little by little. When the clinic was closed on a Wednesday, I had a chance to have a long chat with him.
"You know, she's told me she's okay with getting a divorce,"
he confided. "But since you're still together, she can't be serious. Maybe she's testing your affection, huh? You're certainly loved, aren't you?" We shared a laugh, listening to each other's complaints. Behind the scenes, I felt like I had an ally. My only solace was my father-in-law. Thanks to him, I never vented my complaints or frustrations about my mother-in-law to my husband. It seemed my mother-in-law was complaining about me to my husband. Whenever my husband told me about what my mother-in-law was saying, I would respond with, "I'm sorry, I'll be careful," to put him at ease. No matter how much mother-in-law ignored me, I worked hard and didn't slack off in household chores. Despite this, she continued to treat me as if I was invisible. I was fortunate to have a good relationship with the neighbors. In the midst of all this, my husband's job became busy, and his business trips increased. When my husband was away on business, I dreaded the increased time I had to spend alone with my mother-in-law. Whenever my husband would call, which was rare, I would tell him that I was getting along without any conflicts with mother-in-law. I sincerely hoped that I could get along with her someday. Even though she treated me like air, I never stopped trying to talk to her. I believed that the only way to improve our relationship was to show my mother-in-law, my future self. So I worked hard in everything I could. I continued my routine of waking up early and running to the bakery, which I had been doing since the day we got married. Before I knew it, 3 years had passed since our marriage. As usual, mother-in-law treated both me and father-in-law as if we were air. And I continued to find opportunities to talk with father-in-law when mother-in-law was not around. Then one day, father-in-law, unusually serious, told me,
"Mother-in-law is going on a trip soon. Depending on how that goes, I might leave this house."
I tried to ask him what he meant, but he said,
"I can't tell you now,"
and didn't elaborate. I was saddened by the thought of father-in-law leaving and couldn't help but cry. After all, he was my only ally and source of comfort in this house. The only person who would listen to my complaints. Looking into my eyes, father-in-law suggested,
"Maybe you should consider leaving this house too, Sarah."
I asked him what he meant, but all he said was,
"I can't tell you yet."
Despite my persistent inquiries, all he said was,
"I'll tell you when the time comes. Please wait a little longer."
Trusting father-in-law, I decided to wait until he was ready to talk. And finally, the day was set up for my husband to return home after a 2-month-long business trip. It had been a long business trip, but I was thrilled at the thought of finally being able to live together with my husband. The night before he was due to return, I received a call on the WhatsApp from him. I immediately picked up the phone. Instead of my husband, a woman with a sweet voice started speaking.
Nice to meet you. Are you Aaron's wife?
If you mean my husband, then yes, I replied.
That's right. It's Aaron Smith. My name is Amy Adams. I'm Aaron's girlfriend. I'll give him back to you tomorrow. She giggled.
What kind of relationship do you have with him? Please tell me again.
I told you, I'm his girlfriend. She giggled again.
Do you mean you're his mistress?
No, I'm his girlfriend, and we're planning to get married.
Amy, sounding slightly irritated, came off as either drunk or immature. I see. How did you meet?
I'm a temp worker at Aaron's company.
She laughed. Something about the way Amy kept giggling gave me the sense that she'd spill the beans if provoked. So I decided to push her buttons a bit. Oh, my husband Aaron has been very kind to me. He says he won't have to go on business trips anymore. So I'm really looking forward to our life together. I giggled back.
No more business trips. Did Aaron tell you that?
Yes, we were thinking about starting a family soon. We've been talking about it a lot. Oh, it's so embarrassing. I laughed.
That's impossible. I'm already pregnant with his child.
I was taken aback. Amy had just told me that she was pregnant with my husband's child.
You know your mother-in-law doesn't even recognize you as her daughter-in-law, right? Why don't you just get a divorce?
She chuckled. I was surprised that Amy mentioned mother-in-law, and that brought me back to my senses. Did my mother-in-law say that? Well. I laughed, not knowing how else to respond to the mention of my mother-in-law. Amy, perhaps feeling belittled, angrily replied,
Have you ever gone on a trip with your mother-in-law? Because I have. The 4 of us had a great time.
She then sent a picture over WhatsApp. In the picture were my husband and mother-in-law in summer dress, a woman who looked like Amy, and a man who appeared to be about the same age as my husband. I asked, Who's this man? And Amy giggled.
Oh, I can't tell you that. It's a secret. Are you jealous that I'm close with Aaron and your mother-in-law?
I thought to myself, these people are disgusting. Did you just run into them by chance on a trip? I'm not jealous at all. After all, we're married. Amy responded by sending dozens of pictures of her and my husband without a word. I quickly saved them all. Among them were several pictures of my mother-in-law cozying up with a man. All this doesn't really prove anything. There's no way my husband would betray me. Well, thank you for your time, I said, pretending to hang up the phone.
Wait. I have proof. Just wait.
I waited in silence. She then sent screenshots of her WhatsApp conversation with my husband. There were many of them, and I saved every single one. Then I said, Thank you, and hung up the phone. As soon as I hung up, I burst into tears. I had trusted him. I thought he loved me. I thought he was on my side. I loved him. My emotions were a whirlwind. The confident me who was taunting Amy just a while ago was gone. I stormed out of the house and headed for my father's office. I threw open the door to my father's office and tearfully asked, Where's my dad? My dad seemed too busy to leave his work, so I waited alone in the waiting room crying. After a while, my dad took a break from his work and came to see me. I apologized to my dad for showing up out of the blue and told him everything. Dad said, You're like me. You can't stand injustice. With a smile, he added, You know, crying won't solve anything, right? His words from my childhood, reminding me to face forward after I had cried my fill. I showed him the photo I got from Amy and screenshots of the conversation between my husband and Amy. As he looked at them, he exclaimed, "What the hell is this?" When I peeked at my phone that my dad was looking at, it showed my mother-in-law and a man standing next to her. My dad said he wanted to talk to my father-in-law. My dad, as it turns out, is a lawyer. He seemed to be quietly angry. I sensed that he wasn't his usual calm self. When I returned home and told my father-in-law that my dad wanted to talk to him, father-in-law went into the bedroom and made a phone call. After the call, father-in-law told me, "I'm going to meet your dad, Sarah." The next day, I greeted my husband, who had returned from a business trip, with an inscrutable face. My husband probably hadn't heard anything from Amy. He seemed completely unchanged. My mother-in-law returned a little later from her trip. "I'm tired, but it was fun," she said, and gave me a souvenir from the same region as my husband. As usual, the three of them ate the meal I had prepared without me. As I quietly watched the scene, my husband spoke to me. "Sarah, you seem different since I've been away. Kind of cooler," he said. My mother-in-law immediately chimed in. "Maybe she's sulking because you were on your business trip and she wanted attention," and said it dismissively without even looking at me. Feeling like I might say something I'd regret, I just nodded and smiled, my fists shaking with anger. My father-in-law made eye contact with me and told me to calm down. I nodded and took a deep breath to control my emotions. Just then, my mother-in-law started saying things that upset my calm. "You and father-in-law have been living together just by you two for a while, haven't you? Something happened, didn't it? I can tell, don't hide it, tell me." She insinuated something more than a father-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship between me and my father-in-law. "What do you mean, something happened?" I asked, holding back my anger, and she kept suggesting, "A romantic relationship, right? You had one, didn't you?" "I can't believe it," I said, my voice shaking. My usual taciturn father-in-law asked seriously, "Did you go on a trip hoping for a romantic relationship to happen between me and Sarah?" Staring at my mother-in-law, when she retorted, "If nothing happened, you wouldn't be angry, right? So you're admitting it." My father-in-law said, "I despise you. I can't forgive you as a person," and left the room, saying, "I'll be at the hospital for a while. Don't contact me." My mother-in-law told me, "You can leave too." I stared at my husband. Feeling my gaze, Aaron glanced back at me with a startled look. Observing this, my mother-in-law interjected, "What's the matter? Got an issue with Aaron? Acting all high and mighty. This is why I don't want to talk to you. You should go to your father's veterinary clinic too." She urged me out. My husband did nothing to stop her. I turned to Aaron and asked, "Aaron, don't you have anything to say? We are in the away situation I warned about before our marriage, didn't I? What happened to 'I will protect you if my mom does anything to you'? It was you, Aaron, who dissuaded me when I thought of reconsidering our marriage because I disliked this prospect." My husband seemed shocked by my outburst. Seeing this, my mother-in-law said, "Then why don't you just leave? Get out." I asked Aaron, "Is that okay with you?" But Aaron didn't answer. He just held his head in his hands. "That means get out. Aaron is just too kind to say such words." I kept my gaze on Aaron and finally asked, "So it's okay?" No answer means that's the answer, right? Aaron replied, "I need to think. Please wait a little." And then he went to the bathroom. I didn't wash the dishes, didn't take a bath, and just went to bed in our room. The next morning I woke up earlier than anyone else, did not prepare breakfast, and headed back to my parents' home. Upon arriving, I used my spare key to enter the house and took a shower. My mother, who had been awakened by the sound, seemed surprised to find me in the house. My father also woke up after seeing my face. He simply said, "Good morning," and went into his study. When my father came out of his study, he handed me an envelope. I looked inside it while telling my parents about being told to get out by my mother-in-law, and that I had yet to receive a response from my husband. After I finished looking through the contents of the envelope, I told my parents, "I can't live with Aaron anymore. Can I come back home?" My parents nodded and smiled, saying, "Of course, this is your house." I bowed silently, then looked up. Seeing my face, my father said, "Calm down. Your face looks like you've seen a ghost." I believe I had turned into a vengeful spirit after reading the documents in the envelope. The betrayal by my husband and the unwarranted harassment and verbal abuse from my mother-in-law were swirling around in my head, along with the images. As I took deep breaths, I started to feel a strange sense of enjoyment in the situation, thinking, this is going to be the ultimate revenge. In the afternoon, I headed to my father-in-law's veterinary clinic, which was closed for the day, with my father. My father-in-law, seeing me, called out, "Sarah, are you all right?" He seemed worried about whether I had been able to sleep or eat. I simply replied, "I'm fine." Seeing my expression, he smiled, seeming relieved. From there, my father-in-law, and I had a discussion, and we decided to take action the next day. First, I called Aaron during his lunch break and arranged to meet him at a diner after work. My husband came panting to the seat where I was waiting. "Why didn't you answer after so many calls? Where have you been? What happened?" He bombarded me with questions. I took deep breaths as my father had advised me, trying to calm myself. "I'm sorry for leaving without saying anything. I was just wandering around the city. You know best what happened, don't you?" I said, playing the part of the brave woman with a smile, even though my eyes were teary. Today, I needed to act like a great actress when dealing with my husband. Pretending to hold back tears, I turned around and put eye drops in one eye. My husband, misunderstanding that I was crying for him, muttered, "I'm sorry." He must have thought a message had come from me since I left home, but when he opened our chat room on WhatsApp, he found call records and a lot of pictures and thought he had been exposed. With a very flustered look on his face, my husband said, "I did meet with her, but there's nothing between us. I only love you, Sarah. If you're mad about us meeting, I won't do it again, so please forgive me." A storm of false excuses and apologies. I brushed off my husband's hand when he tried to hold mine and said, "I love you too, but..." With a handkerchief to my eye, I fake cried and said with a shaky voice, "Amy is carrying your child, isn't she?" After saying this somewhat excitedly, I said it more quietly, "Don't let the child suffer. This is my last request to you," playing the part of a brave woman who steps back because the woman her husband cheated with is pregnant. My husband kept saying, "I'm sorry," and cried, saying, "But I only love you, Sarah, and that will never change," repeating cliched lines. My husband felt more guilty than necessary and told me he would give me all of his savings and pay me $20,000 as compensation. It seemed like he wanted to make sure I wouldn't struggle, even if we divorced. I called my father and had him fill out and stamp the divorce papers, and also had him stamp the pledge we created. My husband apologized to my father, but my father dismissed him, saying, "Thanks for the days you spent with my daughter," and left the diner with me. Then I went to my in-laws' house to pack my things. Most of the stuff had been thrown away by my mother-in-law, so all I had was one large bag. My mother-in-law came in and asked with a smirk, "You're moving out?" I replied, "I'm leaving now. Thank you for everything," and headed back home with a spring in my step. As I was unpacking and tidying up at home, I got another WhatsApp call on my phone. I had a feeling that it was a call from Amy to gloat. Sure enough, it was Amy on the phone.
"How does it feel to be a loser ex-wife? I'm on top of the world. There's no man I can't have, huh?"
She began with her usual gloating. I calmly responded, "Good for you. Be happy."
You told him you loved him. Heartbroken? Huh?
I was hurt. "I think a letter will arrive for you later, so please take care of it," I said, and hung up. I was excited, thinking about what was to come. I couldn't wait to see the final stage of the scenario my father had thought up. A few days later, my ex-husband and a woman named Amy sent me alimony. Normally, that would have been the end of it, but for me, it wasn't over just yet. Months later, the time I had been waiting for finally arrived. I received a frantic call from my mother-in-law. "It's all your fault that the house is a mess. Come back and do something about it. And what's with this certified letter you're talking about?" Pretending to be unaware, I asked her, "Calm down and explain what is going on." She was in such a state of panic that it took her a while to calm down. "If you can't talk about it, I'm going to hang up. I'm just an outsider now," I said. She begged me to wait, and then began to explain one thing at a time. Firstly, she told me that my ex-husband and Amy got married last month, but Amy already had 4 children, who she brought along when she moved into my ex-husband's parents' house. The unruly behavior of the kids and Amy's lack of effort in managing household chores and childcare had caused chaos in the house. My ex-husband was in a panic, claiming, "I didn't know about Amy's 4 kids." The alimony I received was reluctantly paid by my mother-in-law after Amy told her that she was going to give birth to her grandchildren. Next, she addressed the certified letter I sent her. It was regarding the repayment of the $10,000 she had taken from my savings without my permission. I asked my father if we could sue her, since she was technically still family, to which he responded with a smirk. "Suing is always an option." My mother-in-law was terrified by the letter and begged me, saying that, "I promised to repay the money, so don't sue me." I agreed, as long as she would return it. She also told me about Amy's current situation. My ex-husband said in front of Amy, "I shouldn't have cheated," and expressed his desire to get back together with me, causing her to become hysterical. My ex was crying out my name, while his new wife was going insane and their children were running wild. My mother-in-law exclaimed, "I feel like I'm going to lose my mind." Eventually, my mother-in-law received divorce papers from my father-in-law, and she was also being sued for compensation due to the affair. My father, who happened to be my father-in-law's lawyer, asked me to try to stop the divorce. When I heard about the current situation in my in-laws' home, I realized that everything had gone according to my father's plan. Both my father-in-law, my father, and I knew from a private investigator's report that Amy had 4 children. Furthermore, while my ex-husband might not know this, there was a possibility that the child in Amy's womb was fathered by one of my ex-husband's colleagues, whom she was dating at the same time. Amy's parents had been taking care of the 4 children, but when they found out about her upcoming marriage to my ex, they told her to take the children with her. Additionally, they disowned her after learning about the affair. So no matter what happens, Amy would cling to my ex-husband's family. It seemed like the time had come for me to deliver the final line in the script. I said, "You all got what you deserved. Goodbye," and blocked their calls, ending everything. After that, I found a job and started living alone near my parents' house. My father-in-law expanded his veterinary clinic and turned it into a residence. When I went to check on him, I was struck by his words. "Maybe I'm happier with animals as my family," he said, as he happily lived with his newly adopted corgi. Witnessing the miserable fate of my mother-in-law, ex-husband, and Amy, I decided to treat others with kindness.
Enough of this racket! Get out of here with that baby, right now! In the middle of the night, my husband was fed up with our babies crying. He shouted angrily, and just like that, he drove me and our 3-month-old daughter out of our home. With the change of seasons, the mornings and evenings were beginning to get chilly, and it looked like it was going to rain any minute. I'm freezing. If we stay out here, will freeze to death. Without a wallet or a coat, I began to shiver as the cold seeped into my bones. Please, let us in! Despite my constant knocking, there was no response from inside. Helpless, I wrapped my crying child tightly in her blanket to keep her warm, and we continued to walk. I must protect my baby, at least. Wandering aimlessly in the night, I was exhausted and found myself sitting on a bench in the park, frozen to the core. As I gazed up at the sky, the events that led us here played back in my mind. How did we end up in this situation? Tears that I could no longer hold back streamed down my cheeks. My name is Olivia, and I am 31 years old. My parents divorced when I was in middle school, and my mother single-handedly sent me to college. 2 years ago, while crossing a pedestrian lane, she was hit by a car and passed away. In exchange for a huge accident compensation, I lost my only family member, leaving me in a state of despair. During this time, Benjamin, who was my college classmate and now my husband, was there to support me. Olivia, you can always lean on me when times are tough. His kind words comforted my aching heart, and we started dating. A year later, he proposed, and we got married. I was grateful that we were blessed with a child so soon, and I thought we could build a happy family. I'm pregnant. We're already 3 months along. What? Are you serious? I thought he would be thrilled, but since he learned about the pregnancy, my husband strangely became distant. Not only that, his attitude became increasingly cold. What is this dinner? Isn't this just fast food? I'm sorry. Morning sickness hit me hard. I couldn't cook. If you can't even manage now, I worry about the future. Useless. The only thing I could do was watch my husband's back as he stormed off after his harsh words. Even when my belly became heavy and bending down became a challenge, he wouldn't lend a hand. Still, I believed that once our baby was born, he would return to his kinder self. After the birth, he visited the hospital right away, but after that, he never showed his face, claiming he was busy with work. When I was discharged, I had to take our daughter home alone. And that's when the real nightmare started. When my daughter and I got home, my husband began yelling loudly every night. The baby's crying, it's too noisy. I have work tomorrow. How am I supposed to sleep? I understand where my hard-working husband, who supports us, is coming from, but I can't seem to soothe our crying daughter. If only my mom was here. With each passing day, I felt a deepening rift between my husband and me, plagued by a sense of loneliness. Even though our daughter is very quiet during the day, when night falls, it's as if she senses her father's tense and angry mood and starts to cry. I don't know what to do anymore. This life is the polar opposite of the warm and happy family I envisioned. My husband leaves all childcare responsibilities to me, claiming he's busy with work. On his days off, he'd say he can't relax at home and would go out. Running around all day taking care of a baby left me exhausted, both physically and emotionally, and our daughter's night crying seemed to get worse each day, as if she could sense my distress. One night, my husband's anger reached its peak. Get out of this house with that baby right now! I can't do that. Before I could finish my sentence, my daughter and I were thrown out into the cold night. Without keys, a wallet, or a cell phone, I couldn't go back home and was left feeling helpless. I wrapped my daughter tightly in a blanket to keep her warm, held her close, and just kept walking until I sat down on a bench, cursing my life. We were supposed to be happy. How did it come to this? As if expressing my inner turmoil, my daughter started crying again, but I was too worn out to move. Just as I was starting to feel faint from the cold, an older woman's voice called out, "Are you okay? Mom?" For a moment, I thought my deceased mother had come from the afterlife. I lifted my face to see a stranger looking worried. What are you doing in such a cold place? My husband kicked me out because of our baby's crying. Did you two have a fight? You'll catch a cold here. Come, stay at my place. But as I hesitated, not sure if I should impose on a stranger, she took my daughter from me, started soothing her, and my daughter suddenly became cheerful. It's okay. Don't worry. Let's go somewhere warm for the baby's sake. Upon entering the house, my daughter was gently wrapped in a soft blanket to ward off the chill. Drink this to warm up. She even offered a warm glass of hot milk. My daughter, nestled in her arms, started to sleep peacefully, her gentle snores echoing in the quiet room. I can't believe it. No matter how much I tried, she just wouldn't calm down. It can be quite tough if you're not used to it. I recently became a grandmother, and I've been taking care of the little one occasionally. Maybe that's why I've become so sensitive to a baby's cries. I'm glad I decided to check on the noise. Looking closely at the woman, her gentle smile tugging at the corners of her eyes, she was around the same age as my mother. The warmth of her atmosphere allowed me to feel at ease for the first time in a while. I'm sorry for intruding like this. It's okay. We should help each other out in times of need. Do you need me to take you home? Do you live close by? No, I might just get thrown out again. Seeing me stumble over my words, she kindly offered me to stay until morning. Her kindness moved me to tears again. Thank you so much. My name is Olivia. Wait a minute. Isn't your baby's name Anne? Yes, but how did you... Turns out, this woman was Jackson, my husband's direct superior. She had sent us a gift when our daughter was born, so she remembered Anne's name. I was surprised at the coincidence and regretted complaining about my husband to her. We're always grateful for your help. The thing is, my husband has been busy with work lately, and he seems quite tired. That can't be right. Your husband has been on parental leave for the past 2 months. What? But he says he goes to work every day. He even said he has work tomorrow. Tomorrow is a holiday. The office will be closed. I wonder what he's up to. I had no idea that my husband, who I thought was always working, was actually on vacation. However, I did notice a sense of excitement on the days he was supposed to be at work. Ever since I got pregnant, my husband's behavior has changed, and I have been feeling something off recently. As I wondered how to investigate my husband's actions, Jackson suggested an idea. Why don't you check his social media? You can use this computer. She pointed to a computer in the corner of the room and turned it on. I gratefully accepted her offer and started scanning my husband's social media. To my shock, I found a pile of photos of him and another woman. He must have thought I was too preoccupied with parenting and housework to ever notice. They look like a couple, don't they? That's Ava! She worked at our company for only 3 months and recently quit. No way! Although I had a hunch, I was too overwhelmed with my first experience of motherhood to consider it seriously. However, realizing he was truly having an affair was more shocking than I had anticipated. Do you know her address? Her contact information? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have mentioned her name. It's personal information, and I can't disclose it. Oh, right. As I deflated, Jackson comforted me. I'll do everything I can to help with anything else. Hey, isn't this the Paris Hotel? I know it's a fancy place, and you've been here several times. Do you have that much money? True enough, there were numerous photos on social media of my husband and his mistress, the woman, indulging in luxury dining at the renowned Paris Hotel. As I was on maternity leave, there was no income, and my husband hadn't saved any money once we got married. There's no way he could have such disposable cash. No way. This can't be happening. With a prayerful heart, I checked my bank balance online and found that my savings of $250,000, which I received when my mother died in a car accident, had been halved. I was so shocked that I was unable to move for a while. What's wrong? My husband has been using my savings without my permission. I hadn't touched it at all because I was planning to use it for our daughter. Looking back, I had left my debit card in the card case with my husband when I was hospitalized for childbirth. Since that day, he hadn't visited me in the hospital even once. And the first time he withdrew from my savings was the day I handed him the debit card. I, who trusted my husband, thought he had locked it in a safe and didn't doubt him. I can't forgive him. He's been using my beloved mother's inheritance without my permission. We must punish the lying cheater, and the best way to do that is to secure evidence. With a smirk on his face, Jackson handed me a digital camera. The next day, as we watched from the car, Jackson was driving near our house. My husband, humming a tune, hopped into his car and drove off. He doesn't even worry about our daughter and me. Instead, he's making a fool of himself by being so excited. As expected, my husband's car arrived at the Paris hotel. After a while, the misters came, and they casually linked arms and entered the hotel restaurant, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I asked Jackson to look after our daughter, and sat quietly in a seat behind them. I've had enough of Olivia's stubbornness. Finally, I kicked her out last night. Now if she files for divorce, I'll get the compensation she received from her mother's car accident. If things go well, I might even get the alimony from the divorce trial. You're a bad man. Your wife doesn't even realize that you're after her money. Since her mother passed away, I've been very kind to her so that she'll never find out. But having a child was an unexpected obstacle. Listening to my husband's unbelievable words, my head went blank from the shock. Unaware of my feelings, my husband, swinging the key to the hotel room, heads for the elevator with the woman. When I secretly followed them, even though it was just a brief moment before the elevator arrived, the two of them began to hug and even start kissing. Even though I was prepared, seeing the affair in action was painful. A chill ran down my spine at my husband's voice, saying, "This is a pre-celebration for kicking Olivia out. Let's have a blast today." Unable to speak up, the two of them were swallowed up by the elevator. Left behind, I was so frustrated that I couldn't say anything, and I was overwhelmed with sadness and despair. I couldn't stand and fell to my knees right there. At that moment, the sadness that dominated my heart began to turn into a desire for revenge. It's too cruel to betray me like this. I can't just let this go. That evening, timing my return for when my husband got home from work, I made my way back to the house. "Whoa, look who's back!" "I'm sorry. I'll do whatever you say from now on. Please, let me back in the house." To tighten the noose around him, I decided to play the part of the obedient wife for a little while, quelling my rising anger. "Fine. From now on, I'm not giving you any living expenses. Do whatever you want." Understood. Without uttering a single word of disagreement and not mentioning divorce, I was clearly annoying my husband. Despite his continued horrible attitude, I kept tolerating it. And while my husband pretended to be at work but was meeting his mistress, I was searching for the house for evidence of his affair. I found several receipts for hotels and meals in his bag and suit pockets, but that alone seemed like weak evidence. So I traced to social media under the woman's name, and her identity was finally revealed. 2 weeks later, all the preparations were ready, and I, once again, visited the notorious Paris hotel. The two of them were nonchalantly having dinner and getting cozy in public, as they did before. I approached them as they were about to get on the elevator. "What are you doing here?" Why are you here?" "I am obviously here for a work meeting." Quickly shaking off the arm entwined with his mistress, My husband, looking guilty, tried to escape. That's odd. Today's a day off, isn't it? Hearing my strong, sharp voice, he turned around in surprise. What? Jackson? You're supposed to be on parental leave, right? How come you're working? Well... My husband, looking pathetic and flustered, had never dreamed I'd be with his boss. His mistress, the woman, also seemed quite surprised, and was at a loss. Hello, Ava. Long time no see. Yes, The mistress, called by name, seemed nervous and unsure of what to do, looking down. The strange atmosphere was palpable, and I could feel the surrounding people staring at us. Since we're drawing attention, let's move this to the room you guys booked. Unless you want me to scatter these photos around here. Is that okay? As I showed the photos that proved their affair to my staggering husband, he quickly grabbed my arm and pulled me into the elevator. Jackson caught the fleeing mistress and brought her along. Why are you with Jackson? The day you kicked me out, I had nowhere to go and was sitting in the park when Jackson heard our daughter crying and invited me in. Seriously? It goes to show you can't do wrong and get away with it. Upon entering the room, I dumped all the evidence I had gathered onto the table, leaving the two of them in shock. What? These photos? I was here the day after you kicked me out of the house. It was shocking, but I took these as evidence of your affair. That's low. That's my line. Lying about work to meet your mistress, and even taking parental leave? How despicable can you get? My husband had no words for me, silenced by what I'd said. But I still had more to say. I'm aware you used my savings without my consent. That money was a legacy from my mother. That's our shared property. I don't see an issue with me using it. What? It's not shared property, it's mine, and mine alone. Really? Is that so? Yes, it is. So you will return the $120,000 you used. Come on, we're married. Let's not get into such tedious matters. Exhausted by his indifference, I swiftly pulled out the divorce papers from my bag and slammed them on the table. I'm fed up with you. Fill out these divorce papers immediately. That's a leap, don't you think? Didn't I hear you say you wanted me to bring up divorce? I played a recording of a conversation we had during a previous meal. His unbearable words echoed throughout the room. Give me a break. Not a chance! To think you approached me just for my money? It all became clear after I heard our conversation from that day. That's why you became so cold all of a sudden. There's a lot to this situation. I don't want to hear any excuses or lies. Pay me $20,000 for the affair, $10,000 for all the times you mistreated me, $120,000 for the money you took from my savings, and $110,000 for child support until our daughter turns 20. That's a total of $260,000 in one lump sum. What mistreatment? You kicked me and our daughter out of the house in the middle of the night and didn't provide living expenses. He clearly didn't expect his actions to become grounds for financial restitution in a divorce proceeding. Sweating profusely, his desperate plea for calm was pitiful. Just calm down. Let's talk this out. Don't mock me. And don't think you're out of this either. I'll be seeking $20,000 in damages. From you, too. When I pointed at his mistress, she turned pale. I have to pay too? Of course! But in return, I'm divorcing him. So you two can be open about your relationship. That should be a relief, right? This is a problem. I'm sorry. Forgive me. My desperate husband apologized, while his mistress was speechless, her mouth gaping open. I took the house keys and card case from my husband's bag. I sold the house that was in my name. Jackson reported everything to the company, and it seems you're going to be fired. When I told your parents about this, they were absolutely furious. They're considering cutting ties with you, so you've lost everything, haven't you? Please, spare me. This one time, I'll be a good husband, I promise. My husband's plea, his face a mess of tears and snot, was the most pitiful sight I'd ever seen, and it completely wiped away the last shreds of compassion I might have had for him. It's absolutely pathetic that he thought such a lie would work on me. We turned our backs on the sorry spectacle of those two and left the room. My husband was officially fired, losing not just his home, but his workplace too. I didn't want to see my husband ever again, so I arranged for a divorce through a lawyer. I demanded compensation for the divorce, the money he had squandered, and child support. His parents were furious with him, and since he couldn't pay all the compensation in one go, his father forced him to work in a mine. He would have his wages garnished to pay me back. I got an immediate payment of $20,000 from his mistress. My daughter and I left the house we've been living in, bought a small apartment, and started our new life. The moment we started living here, my daughter's night crying stopped completely. I'm really grateful for Jackson, who worries about us and calls us every now and then. Together with my daughter, I will build a happy, smile-filled home.